Call the meeting to order. This is a special board meeting, budget workshop of the Board of Trustees of the Harlingen Consolidated Independent School District. This special meeting has been posted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. We do have a quorum. We will start by having a review of our budget workshop and presentation by our CEO, Mr. Julio Cavazos. Mr. Cavazos.
Thank you, Mr. McShann, Dr. Cavazos. Board members, this is our third budget workshop for this year. We don't anticipate any changes as we move forward when the board adopts the budget on August 22nd. So we're trying to bring it to the board and have the public hearing. Again, this is the third budget workshop. I mean, very minor changes from the last budget workshop. We're going to go estimated revenues and appropriations. If you go look at page number 3, we have a recap of the estimated revenues and appropriations. Our total estimated revenues in the middle of the page is about $175.9 million. And we'll go over the details of that here in a little bit as to the changes from last year. We have about $42 million in local revenues, another $128.2 million in state revenues, and about $5.3 million in federal revenues and other sources. If you flip over to the next page on the estimated revenues, this is just a recap of our budgets over the past 2 years in 2015-16, 16-17, where we projected to be as far as revenues for this year, 16-17, our actual revenues where we think we're going to be by the end of the fiscal year, and the estimated budget for this upcoming year. Again, if we look at our budget for 2015, local revenues to about $39.5 million. This current year, we had about $41.1 million. We're going to be about $41.4 million in actual realized revenues. Our proposed budget is going to be about $42.4 million as we move forward. Most of the increase there is in property tax revenues. We did have about a 3% increase in our total taxable value, so that amounted to the increase in property tax revenues. Our state revenues, if we look at 2015, we had ADA at 17,302. 16-17, we had an ADA at 17,427. We had a reduction in our average daily attendance this year to about 17,234. So our estimated budget as we move forward is going to be based on that estimated ADA of 17,234. We want to be conservative there and try to at least reach that amount that we think it might be a little bit higher before the end of the year. Our total state revenues, again for 2015-16, $123.3 million. 16-17, we budgeted about $126.3. Total projected realized about $125.2 million. We're going to budget and estimated state revenues about $128.2 million in total state revenues, and we'll go over the difference, the changes here in a little bit. Our federal revenues, in 15-16, $3.3 million budget. This current year, 4.3. We're going to be at about $5 million in total federal revenues. So our budget is going to be $5.3 million, which will also include an operating transfer there from a workers' comp insurance to offset any type of insurance increases. Again, a total estimated revenue about $175.9 million, almost $176 million in local dollars. So here's a quick one-pager of the increase in revenues and what we budgeted. Again, in 16-17, in total local revenues, property taxes, we budgeted about $38.5 million. We're gonna budget this year about $39.7. So that's an increase of about almost $1.2 million. And that's, again, due to the increase in property tax value. So, the higher the property tax value, the higher property taxes we receive. Interest income, we actually budgeted $100,000. So we're projected to be about $350,000. So we're budgeting $350,000 for interest income. So that's an increase of $250,000. And again, as the rates increase, so do our returns of our investments. So we're probably going to be about $400,000 this year in interest income. So, but we're being conservative there, and we're budgeting $350,000. In state revenues, again, $119 million what was budgeted. We're going to realize about 119. We budgeted about 119.2 in foundation dollars. we're gonna realize about $119 million. This year, we're budgeting $120 million, so the increase there is about $1.4 million in additional state revenues. And that is due to a change in the Tier 2 funding structure from the state. So they increased our Tier 2 yield, so we realized about $1.4 million in additional state revenues. Another big increase there is on our Medicaid billing. We budgeted about $3,093,000. We're projected to be about 3.7. We feel comfortable to budget about $4 million. I think we think we're gonna generate more than that. So that increase is about $907,000 in those Medicaid billings that we do generate. And then the last item there is an operating transfer. We're proposing to transfer some monies from our workers' comp fund balance, which we have reserves there about a little bit over $2 million. So that are, they're not designated for anything, but we feel that we can offset some of our health insurance costs to about $300,000 over the next couple of years just using those reserves. So again, the total increase in budgeted revenue is about a little bit over $4 million in total of revenue increase, plus or minus some other little minor items on the revenue budget. Again, this is a quick one-page summary, as you can see the increases in our funding. So we go back to the to that page number 3, that recap. Again, $175 million in total revenues. So on appropriations, we start with what we had budgeted last year, then add any or subtract any new items. We have some staffing guideline adjustments to the tune of about $660,000, and that's due to the net decrease of staffing that we have been working on. Human Services, along with the other departments, have been working to trying to finalize the increases and decreases in staffing. So the net there, and I think it's let me go to page page number 11. This is a recap of all of those positions. So the only thing that changed from last budget workshop, we're at a net reduction of 770. We added 2 additional K teachers, for the health sciences, 1 at each of the high schools. So that brought the net to $660,000 realized savings in the reduction of staff, offset with the additional new staff. So we take that number and bring it back to the recap. That's a $660,000 net adjustment there. So that's a savings. Strategic plan item, it's a one-time item there for some additional items that Dr. Cavazos needs to appropriate as we move forward. So we had about $73,000 that we budgeted there. And I think those are some FFA programs and some speech and drama programs that we wanted to put the monies in there. Increase in TRS contributions. The state did adjust our rates this year for the district's portion. So the net increase to our budget is about $210,000 in additional TRS contributions, so that we have to take that into consideration. And then some reductions there, a reduction in property insurance, about $100,000. Some reductions to campus allocations, about $188,000. And department decreases, about $430,000. Those numbers didn't change from the last budget workshop. So our net total estimated appropriation is about $171.6 million. So we take our estimated revenues of 175.9, and we back out that estimated appropriations of 171.6. Leaves us about $4.3 million to allocate towards salary increase and health insurance increases, estimated increases. So right now, we have a proposed salary increase of about $3.2 million. And before I proceed with the rest of my presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Rosie to go over that item. Let me go back. So she can talk about the actual proposal.
Okay, Ms. Vargas.
Thank you, President McShann, board members, Dr. Cavazos, and Mr. Cavazos, thank you. So we'd like to start today's presentation with a focus on our TASB salary study. You do have a copy of this presentation in your board binder behind Mr. Cavazos' presentation. So if you'll just flip over a few more pages, you should find it. and I'm on page 3 of that presentation. So we'd like to focus on the TASB salary study that was conducted during the 2016-17 school year. So it's in your board binder, in your blue binder. It
Yes.
has some information
Behind
from that
tab
report.
4.
Yes, behind tab
Tab
4.
4, behind tab 4.
So our TASB salary study in 2010, really our focus for that study was for us to have an effective pay system that would address both the needs of the organization of HCISD and the expectations of our employees. And really our focus for this study was to be able to recruit highly qualified employees and to be able to retain those employees, to keep them with us. And we also hope that we would be able to compensate for jobs appropriately for different types of jobs and their values. Likewise, our employees expect of us to have fair pay for their job responsibilities, fair pay for those who are doing similar jobs to their own, and I would expect that our employees would also like to see an annual pay raise for continued service. So going to our next item, we'd like to really have a 3-year strategic plan for a responsible implementation of these TASB recommendations. And so that's what we have decided to do. So we'd like to share with you the areas of focus for our 3-year plan. The areas of focus would include, first, our teacher staff salaries. We'd also include their adjustments to steps that are currently below market value, to certain steps. Our auxiliary staff salaries is our second area of focus, and that would include adjustments to those that would fall below minimum, and we'd give them an adjustment to bring them to 0.5% above that minimum, and also placement adjustments to the new salary scale as recommended by TASB. Our next one would be adjustment to the salary structure, and this would be to our entire salary structure, including adjustments to bring employees to 0.5% above minimum to ensure that we are competitive in our job market. The fourth one is a 2.5% of midpoint for administrative and other professional staff, and this would be of our new salary structure as recommended by TASB. And the final one there is a 3% of midpoint for all of the other hourly staff not included with our auxiliary staff. And again, this would be of the new salary structure as recommended by TASB. So let's look at our teacher salaries. So this is our first area of focus for our strategic plan. The group that we were compared to includes our Region 1 districts. These are the districts that we typically compete against for our teaching staff. And our teacher pay raises that we'd like to consider. So at this time, teacher pay raises are being considered across the state of Texas. And we are recommending that we have a $1,200 raise for all certified teachers. And we also recommend that that pay raise include a $1,000 projected pay raise to teachers to be authorized and paid by the state of Texas. However, should the Texas legislature not pass this legislation, then we are recommending that the budget be amended to include funding for the full $1,200 pay raise, and that could be passed at a later board meeting. So to summarize, the teaching staff increases would include a pay range of midpoint increase of about $1,200, and that would be affecting approximately 1,284 teachers currently in our employ at a cost of about $1.5 million. We would also include adjustments, like I mentioned earlier, to certain years. Those years would include years 1 and 2, years 10, 12 through 24. This would affect approximately 426 employees at a cost of $376,250 for a total of approximately $1.9 million. So this would be our recommended teacher salary schedule. you'll see in column number 2, that's our schedule that we had this last year in 2016-17, where we had recommended an increase of $1,300 last year with a starting teacher pay of $46,000. This year, you'll see the third column where we are recommending for the 2017-18 school year a $1,200 increase. In bringing that $1,200 increase, you'll notice that years 0 and years 1 are compressed. They're the same. So in an effort to adjust that, we are going to be doing additional adjustments. And as you know, this district has done that for several years, adjusting our steps to ensure that we have a better structured salary schedule. And so as recommended by TASB, we would be looking at years 1 and 2. Year 10 would also be getting an additional adjustment, and years 12 through 24 would also be receiving an additional adjustment. And you'll see the blue highlighted area is the schedule that we are recommending for the 17-18 school year. And we would hope that this is aligned, better aligned to the TASB recommendation and would ensure a more evenly spaced structure. So moving on to our next slide, here we have a second comparison group in which we can see that not only did we include Region 1 districts, but there are other districts included that are comparable to our district. The bottom arrow is where we currently compare with this group. The top arrow is where we would be with the $1,200 increase and with the additional adjustments to those previously discussed steps. However, this comparison shows where we currently are at in the current job market. We anticipate that there may be some changes to this market. So I'll go ahead and go to the next group that we'll be focusing on, and that would be our auxiliary staff group.
Can you go back to the prior slide, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be a 47 plus, you see, for the 5 years out, they're gonna be doing something as well. So we'll be the worst ahead of. Okay.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move on to slide number 14. But before we begin our discussion on our auxiliary staff salary recommendations, we'd like to start our discussion with previous TASB reviews. So some of you may know that back in 2010, we had a TASB salary study. And the focus of this salary study included our auxiliary staff salaries, our instructional support staff salaries, that would include our instructional and paraprofessional groups, and our administrative support staff salaries, which would include our secretarial and clerical groups. And we also had a study of our stipends at that time. Mm-hmm. However, you may also remember that we had a recession, and that was across the nation. Started around 2008, kept on going throughout 2010. At the end of the school year, 2009-10, we also had some state budget cuts, and education was hit pretty hard that year. The TASB study recommendations that we received at that time, we were unable to implement them. That was the summer of 2010. At the end of that school year, 2010-11, you may recall that we had a reduction in positions by about 108 positions, and this was done through the Voluntary Exit Incentive Program. And at that year, we did not have an increase for the first time in many years, but that was done in an effort to safeguard employee jobs from a reduction in force. And so that was then, and this is now. So we wanted to compare the needs of our hourly groups. And again, those include our auxiliary, administrative support, and instructional support. For our auxiliary staff, we had 22 positions that were reviewed. Of those 22, 2 of them were at or above market, but 20 of them were below market. and 11 of those were below 14% or more of market. The administrative support group, we had 22 that were reviewed. Of the 22, 4 of them were at or above market, but we had 18 that were below market, but only 8 of those were below the 14% at market. And our instructional support group, we had 7 groups that were reviewed. None of them were at or above market. However, 7 of them were below market, but only 1 of them was below the 14%. So they were below market, but not by much, right? So we decided to look to see where we could make the biggest impact with the largest group, and that's why we are recommending that we look at the auxiliary group. So here you can see in this graph, you can see the 2 positions that we talked about that were above market, but the rest of those positions are below market. And I'd like to draw your eye to the light blue area, because these are the positions that are below 10% to market. And some of these groups are rather large. If you look at, I'll start with the one just above the light blue. So our bus drivers are at 9% below market. We have our trades assistants, our bus monitors, and our child nutrition managers at the high schools, who are between 11 and 13% below market. Then we have our lead custodians at our elementary campuses, and our vehicle mechanics that are about 15% below market. And then we have our child nutrition managers at our elementary schools, who are at 18% below market. Our locksmith lead at 19% below market. Then we have our HVAC journeyman mechanic at 19% below market. Electrician journeyman and carpenters at 20% below, and our plumber journeyman at 30% below. So these are items that we're hoping would be corrected through this adjustment of the salary structure. So here's our recommendation for our auxiliary staff increases. We begin with a 3% of range midpoint increase. This would affect approximately 582 employees at a cost of $398,000. We also would include adjustments to 0.5% above pay range minimum. So those that fall below the minimum, we would bring them above the minimum. That would affect about 121 employees at a cost of $78,200. And finally, a placement to scale adjustment. So as we adjust the scale, TASB has recommended that we place certain positions in certain areas. And even just with the change of the scale, some of these positions would be paid at a higher rate. And so that affects at about 206 employees at a cost of about $162,000. So the total recommendation, the cost would be about $638,547.
Rosie, there's some overlap there, I'm assuming, in terms of some of the ones that are placement scale, and then the ones that are getting the 3%?
You are correct. Some
okay.
of them would be getting the they would all be getting the 3%, but some of them would be getting adjustments on top of that to bring them up to minimum, or because of where they're placed in the scale. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
So I'd like to bring us back to our strategic plan, year 1. So here are the areas that we would be focused on: our teacher salary staff, including adjustments to certain steps; our auxiliary staff salaries, including adjustments to 0.5 above minimum and placements to adjustments to the new scale; adjustments of salary structure, and that's the entire structure, including adjustments of 0.5% above minimum for those employees who fall below minimum; 2.5% of midpoint for administrative and other professional staff of the new structure, and a 3% of midpoint for other hourly staff, again, of the new structure. And if you'll turn to the last page in our presentation, you'll see the estimated costs for these staff increases. So for the recommendation for our teacher salaries, that would be at a cost of about $1.9 million. Our recommendations for auxiliary staff salaries would come at a cost of about $638,500,000. Our adjustments to salary structure, including adjustments to bring employees to above minimum, would be about $151,000. We have 3% of midpoint for hourly staff of the new salary structure. That would be at a cost of about $455,800,000. And we have 2.5% of midpoint for administrative and other professional staff of the new salary structure at a cost of about $484,600. And that would bring us to a total of about $3.6 million. 90% of that is paid more or less out of local, and so that would be about $3.2 million. And so I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Mr. Cavazos to continue the conversation. We'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from Ms. Vargas, for Ms. Vargas on this presentation? Again, TASB did this study. They had done it for the past 6 or 7 months. They did finalize it, and they brought forward their adjustments, and there were some additional adjustments there, but we just can't incorporate all the adjustments that they had. So we decided to do a 3-year plan, and the first year we're going to address certainly the teachers and get them up to close to market, and then the auxiliary staff implementing pretty much 100% of TASB's recommendation for auxiliary. So,
And just to remind the board, auxiliary includes the groups that were in that chart,
On the
correct?
list.
Right.
Okay.
So that would be transportation, that would be our maintenance group, that would be our child nutrition group,
Custodial.
and our
Custodial.
custodial
And
group.
correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, this is, typically our hourly workers, is that
Yes.
correct?
Hourly
Yeah.
workers.
I just want to thank you for doing this. I mean, obviously, I realize the TASB initiative had a real good, real good impetus behind this, but I think this is something that we've been discussing for a long time, and so I applaud staff for looking at this. I mean, I think we all hear sometimes from hourly workers, and sometimes it's good to see the data to back up what they're, complaining about, and it's time that we correct that. So I appreciate that. The other thing I was going to ask is, so what happens during special session? There's still some discussion about $1,000, this, that, the other. So that would be in addition to whatever we do, or that's a question?
No, actually, there is a motion, that we would ask the board to as they, motion for the approval of salary increase, is to incorporate any type of increase that the state passes as part of this increase. So in other words, it wouldn't be an additional $1,000 for the teachers. It would be incorporated into this $1,200. So we're not gonna do, we're not gonna do $1,000 more. It's gonna be within this $1,200.
So just to provide just some clarity there. So, I mean, obviously, if that doesn't pass, we would still be recommending this increase, and we would still be able to handle that as a recurring expenditure. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
sir.
So then I guess the question then becomes, and the reason is that we wouldn't want to incur an additional
Right.
expenditure, and so that's why you're making that.
Yeah, because the talks have been, from the state, that the governor wanted $1,000 increase.
We're doing more, 1,200.
Yeah, we
Or,
are.
I mean, you're recommending 1,200. Is that-
1,200, but he wanted $1,000 increase with existing funds. In other words, there's no existing funds, but we're saying, hey, we're gonna do $1,200
Gotcha.
now.
Gotcha.
If that passes, then this is part of that.
Got you.
Mr. Cavazos, if I may, sample motion language has been provided by our legal counsel, and it's located in the front pocket of your board binder. If you'd like to review that may provide some clarity as well.
Thank you.
If the state does come through with $1,000, how much will it reduce that bottom line?
We don't know if there's gonna be any appropriations, any revenues,
But I know, but if they do, I mean.
If they do, it's going to help us a lot, because
Yeah.
essentially,
Because we're building
it's
it
just
into
a
this
$200
number.
hit to the bottom line per teacher, basically.
Right.
That's
I mean,
correct.
it's, we have 1,284 teachers. If they were to give us $1,000 per teacher, that's $1.2 million.
So that'd be the difference.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Pretty impressive.
But if that, right now the talk is they're going to recommend $1,000 increase, but the districts have to absorb the cost. And so that's the issue, or it is gonna be suspended till 2019, 2020. And so we don't, the language right now, it doesn't look like it's gonna come with any additional money. So it's incorporated into the budget, and the motion language is going to speak to that it's not in addition to, but it's outside of whatever the legislators do, it's gonna be the 1,000 or the 1,200. Yeah, you're correct.
Well, I think, you know, the nice thing is your recommendation is higher than
That's
what's
correct.
being considered.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, for anybody out there saying, well, God, you know, had you just waited a little bit, if assuming they're past that, right? Assuming they pass that. They may not pass that. People out there may say, well, gosh, you know, maybe you would have given us a better bump. I mean, listen, that can always get adjusted, you know, next year or whatever. I
That's
mean,
correct.
Right.
that just, I mean, that's more money that we have that we can, you know, depending what happens this next year, right? A lot of things, there's a lot of things variation with funding, with enrollment, with I mean, there's all kinds of variabilities that sort of impact the bottom line in terms of the balance sheet. And so we could always, you know, that could mean possibly, you know, a bigger bump next year. Who knows? But I think right now, at least as you're proposing a higher raise than what's being proposed by the.
Correct, and we, you know, we think that, you know, at the earliest, they're probably gonna implement that 18, 19, but even at that, maybe even the following biennium.
So to go back to one thing you mentioned, so just 1 year in the past 10 years that we have not given a bump, is that correct?
Yeah, and it's probably been
Well, in
longer
the
than that.
last- I
Yeah.
can say that,
Has it been longer than that, or has it been?
I can't remember, maybe once in the 90s, we may have had, we did not give a pay raise. But the $5.4 billion cut from the legislature for education fund, it caused us to have to lay off reduced by 116, I think, staff members in our district. And that was voluntary. And as a result of that, we did not have to lay off people. We did not have to have a RIF,
Sure.
reduction workforce. And so what we were able to do was to not give a pay raise, but our staff stayed intact. And that's the first time that I can recall, honestly. We may have done it once in the 90s, but we've continued to give pay raises every year. And as a result, you can see that we're much more competitive, particularly with starting salaries with new teachers. We're catching up with districts like Weslaco has always been very high, and the Laredo district, United, has been fairly high as well. So we've become very competitive. Also, let me just say this, in working with superintendent, we looked at what happened with teachers, and looked at the salary survey showed that we got compressed from years like year 10 and years 12 through 24, years experience. Those teachers were, the salaries were low. So they made that adjustment. So some teachers will receive as much as maybe $1,500, depends, and they have the details on that.
Yeah, I think they were up to $2,700.
Up to $2,700.
$2,700.
And I think it affected about, 426, did I see that right?
Teachers.
Teachers.
On the
Yeah,
step
there's
adjustment.
about 426 that would get additional more than the $1,200 based on where they
Exactly.
are on the step, yes.
So when you look at that, we have, how many teachers do we have? 13?
1284.
So you do the math, that affects what?
1/3 of it.
A third of your teachers. So that in itself is going to be a morale booster. People have been here for long. They're committed to a career in teaching. They've been here 12 years, 20 years. So this is really, I think, going to be a morale booster for them.
Can I ask one other question?
Yes.
Mr. President, if you look at the first sheet of the budget recap, of the 3.282 whatever million proposed salary increase, what percent of that, because I haven't done the math, what percent of that is auxiliary staff and what percent of that is teachers?
Teachers is $1.9 million. Auxiliary staff is $638,000 at the percentage over the total increase. Can't do that.
That's okay,
Trying to do the
but
math in my head. 638 divided by 3.2 is that percentage.
because so the rest is administration and things like that.
Well, and 1.9 is teachers.
And teachers.
And then there's some other hourly staff that is also getting some increase that is not an auxiliary.
But in years, so this is it's a much higher percent that's
Yes,
auxiliary staff this year than in previous years.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. It's a lot higher than in the past. We've always tried to give a little bit more of a percentage increase But with the additional adjustments, yeah, it's a lot higher percentage of the total increase for the auxiliary.
And I think we should continue to start I mean, this was a corrective,
Mhm.
this was a correction, I mean, right, this
This
is
is
a correction,
corrections.
right? There may be need another correction, I don't know, maybe there may be another need for the one later, but I'm saying I think we should continue that trend. I like the trend of giving a little bit, if there's a percent,
Yeah.
giving a little bit higher percent to our hourly,
Sure.
I think,
we've
I
got
for
half
one
a-
like
half
that.
a percent.
Of all the recommendations, Dr. Perez, that TASB made, the auxiliary staff recommendation is at 100% of what TASB is recommending. And so all of those people will be brought to market. And so, and of course, you saw the discrepancy. They were up to 25, 30% off market.
Right.
So,
Right.
based on the study. And so this is going to be the most significant adjustment for that group as well as the other hourly employees.
Yeah.
Piggybacking
Yes.
off what Dr. Perez just said, after this adjustment, is this something that we would revisit on a yearly basis to see, kind of just keep them up to par or
Yeah.
give those
Yes.
increases? Because, you know, again, to, what I was thinking was, I just wanted to commend you guys for doing this, the staff. It is a TASB recommendation, but we all know that, I don't think anybody in this room or anybody will disagree with us that these folks, these auxiliary folks really deserve everything they get. You know, they keep the school district running, they keep it clean, they get our students to school. And when I saw that approximately number of employees affected, it says 582, but it affects more than that. You know, I mean, they have families at home that increase is really gonna affect them. So that 582 could be quadrupled as far as people affected in our community because of this. So I just wanna commend you all for that. And again, you know, is this something we could revisit
Yeah,
in coming years?
yeah, so every year we try to adjust our salary ranges accordingly. So from this point forward, we're taking that new salary range and we'll make whatever adjustments we think is necessary. And even if we have to go back to TASB and talk to them, okay, what's a good adjustment from year to year? Because we haven't done that before. Before, we'll make an adjustment ourselves, 2 or 3% to the pay range. But I think it might be a good idea to talk to TASB on an annual basis
Sure.
and get their input.
And that is one of their recommendations, that we have an annual review.
Very good.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent question. Ms. Flourier?
Yes, I would like to agree with my colleagues. I just want to commend the district for the wisdom in getting this kind of a comprehensive analysis. Dr. Cavazos likes to say deep dive, and so we thank you very much for doing it. And certainly, I think all of us, staff and board, are interested in having this kind of information on an annual basis. So I was really impressed when I read through this at how comprehensive it was, how detailed within the comprehension it was, and I'm just really excited that we have taken this step. It's a very bold step. I'm impressed also with your plan to have the 3-year rollout. I'm wondering if you could address a couple of things, and one is there were multiple recommendations by TASB, and you, as staff, have wisely selected the ones which are the most critical, you believe, and that we can really address in a significant manner, which I appreciate. So I'm wondering, what is our thinking about the others? And then secondly, I guess just a thought, one of the things that Dr. Cavazos and I talked about is how critical this is going to be in terms of the rollout, so that everyone understands, since it does not affect everyone, it affects selected groups who have perhaps been inadvertently marginalized in the past. And I think that how we tell that story to our staff is going to be really very important, that everyone understands that we're doing it to bring people up to the reasonable and marketplace. But I think that some attention would need to be given to that, and I for one would be interested in how we're going to roll it out when that time comes.
Yeah, and we do have a 3-year plan that we want to try to work on to try and get everybody up to market. The next step is to look at our stipends, and some of the stipends need to be adjusted. Some of the other pay groups like administration support, instructional support,
Right.
Which are also hourly individuals, we're going to look at that closely. And also, we didn't fully implement TASB's schedule for teachers, so we might add a little bit more next year.
So within the 3-year plan, we will have addressed all of TASB's recommendations in some form or fashion, with the understanding that every year we look annually at where we are and look at, I think it's a great plan.
Correct.
I think it's a great plan.
Okay, so back to the recap here. So we have, set aside, for the salary increase about $3.2 million, which is what Mrs. Vargas went over. And we have set aside for health insurance costs about $1 million. So we did get the proposals in, and, we have a scheduled employee benefit committee meeting on August the 8th. If we can get the consultants in a little bit earlier to have a full discussion with the board, might be a wise idea to kind of let them give us their input. But I can tell you that, we're happy with the proposals. Worst case scenario is that $1 million if we go with fully insured with Blue Cross. The consultants is saying that in looking at the self-funded plan, that we could possibly, keep the same benefits and maybe a minimal increase of maybe 5%. So it looks very favorable. Again, we're still looking at those plans. We'll have, we had a long discussion with them yesterday. We're going to continue those discussions, and if we're ready to have maybe a presentation next week.
And Mr. President, one of the things that Mr. Costas and I spoke about is that maybe after the Transforming Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, we're going to poll the board and see if we have a quorum so that we have a special board meeting just to do a deep dive into those proposals, and so people really understand what we're looking at in the comparisons of those proposals. So
Yeah, I
we'll
mean,
be doing
there's,
polling the board.
yeah.
That would be Tuesday, August the 1st?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they gave us like about a 40-page PowerPoint that they had broken down each of the plans, and then 3 other PowerPoints on the pharmaceutical side. The co-pays and the discounts that each of the networks have. Very comprehensive, but it's a lot of information. So I think if we can kind of condense that and have them present to us to the board, next week will be great.
Very well.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Mr.
Yeah.
Cavazos?
So one last thing, Mr. McShann, that I want to touch on is on page 14 is our statement of revenue and expenditures and fund balance and the estimated for this year. I think it's important to kind of briefly go over that as to where we think we're going to be for this year. So, and actually, these numbers didn't change from the last budget workshop that we had in June. We're still estimating about $174.4 million in total revenues, about $180 million in total expenditures, and that includes about $50 million from TRE projects. So our net revenues over expenditures is a reduction of about 6.3, and again, that's due to the $50 million from TRE. We had some operating transfers when we did that bus lease. So our total net expenditures over revenues is about $4.1 million. We began the year with a $39.2 million fund balance. We're gonna end at about $35 million fund balance. About 2.7 of that is earmarked for this for the school health professionals bond payment. So we're going to be about a $32 million fund balance at the end of this year that we feel comfortable as we move forward.
Okay,
Somehow we're always around that number, aren't we, George? Just say, in
yes.
perpetuity.
Okay, that's on page 14, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
page 14, and then
That's
there's
14.
a graph of the historical fund balance over the
Right.
years, and again, probably about 32 at year end.
And again, it's important to note that the definition of the fund balance changed with the passing of the tax ratification election, because it was usually for emergencies, and actually the TRE is filling that space. And so 32 million is in fact a fund balance that is not necessarily for emergencies, but it's for operating and the 3 months that we need to have in reserve.
Okay,
And thank
very well. Any other questions regarding the budget workshop? And we're scheduled to have the budget approved, I think, around August 22nd.
Yes, sir.
Is that-
August 22nd, and we polled the board, and we do have a quorum for that day.
Well, just one other comment on the fund balance. I think that, if the plan is to pay, 31 million is great. I think that's healthy, especially with the proviso that was mentioned by Dr. Cavazos in terms of our unique situation with our TRE. But I think that going forward, if we intend to pay for our next school cash, that you know, that it should be trending upward year by year, you know, because, you know, and so that way every few years, you know, it goes up to whatever, and then boom, you pay something, you know, $18 million or $19 million build a school, but then it kind of goes back up and you have that kind of stuff. And so I think, you know, theoretically, that would be the concept.
Right.
If you're gonna do, if we're gonna sort of have that kind of, and of course, things change. A few years from now, taxes or the 99 bonds will roll off. And then, of course, there's other things in play.
Right.
But I mean,
Right.
I think that's something that we kind of have to try to keep an eye on year by year.
Sure, I mean, absolutely, I think, you know, if we, can increase our fund balance by $1 million, $2 million a year, it will build up, to $40-45 million within the next 6-7 years. And then at that point in time, we'll be able to, to pay a school for cash. But we do have that, one of the good things about the TRE is we do have those $10 million, and we can also use that to pay.
Absolutely.
Part of it or something.
Part of it, yes,
Sure.
So remember the strategic financial plan, we laid out about a 5 to 6 year plan of the projects we need to do. But if the board decides, on the 7th year, we intend to build a new elementary school because of so-and-so, then you could designate the entire 10 million as a beginning point,
Absolutely.
and then take
the
some
rest
from.
from fund balance.
That's correct. That's correct.
Got it.
So it puts us in a great position, so.
Well, excellent. Let me just say that the looking at the budget workshop, Mr. Cavazos, looks like we're very close. I mean, what you presented today, there are knowns. We know that we got the health insurance bid in. It's in a range that we're
Yes.
pleased to know about. And there, and as far as the legislature is concerned, the $1,000 increase for teacher raises, we've taken care of that with the $1,200 increase, so that will not impact us. So we're very close, so very good. And there aren't any other questions about the budget workshop. Let's move then to the consideration approval of salary increases for the 2017-2018 school year. You heard the presentation from Ms. Vargas. We looked at increases for teachers, as well as those adjustments, increases for auxiliary employees, along with adjustments in accordance with the TASB salary survey, and then, of course, increases for other professionals at midpoint at 2.5%. That's the gist of the recommendation for salary increases for 2017-2018 school year. And what is your pleasure?
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Trustees approve a $1,200 raise for all certified teachers that includes the $1,000 projected pay raise to teachers to be authorized and paid by the state of Texas. Should the Texas legislature fail to pass this legislation, I further move that the Board of Trustees amend the budget to include funding for the full $1,200 pay raise at a later board meeting.
I second.
We have a motion by Dr. Muniz, second by Mr. Greg Powers. Is there discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
So, Julio, does that cover all the salary increases, or do they have to have another motion for salary increases? That a motion covers the $1,200 raise for teachers.
It does.
So do they need to do a recommended approval for consideration and approval of salary increases as presented?
As presented along with that motion, yes. 'Cause
Okay,
there's,
so they need to add that
Mr.
part,
Mr.
and approval of salary increases as presented.
Mr. President,
Huh?
Mr. President, I move approval of the salary increases for the 2017-2018 school year, inclusive of all of those presented, auxiliary and hourly staff, that wasn't already addressed with the teacher motion, as presented by administration.
I second the motion.
Okay, motion by Dr. Pettis, second Ms. Laurier. Is there discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And that would include administrative as well.
It includes everything that was
Administrative and
presented.
auxiliary,
yes.
all other except the teacher, because that was a previous motion, right?
Right, I mean, it will be as presented, and
That's right.
at the budget workshop, and we discussed, the $1,200 increase with the teachers, plus the adjustments in steps, with a starting salary of $42,200, plus the 3% a midpoint adjustment to the salary ranges plus the additional changes to the scales and auxiliary and the other staff.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Okay, very well. Is there any opposition? The motion carries. Okay, it's 6:52. We'll adjourn to close our executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082, the Open Meetings Act for the following purposes: discussion of purchase of real estate, Lot 6, Block 2, Nicholson Place, third reading, in addition to the city of Harlingen, Cameron County, Texas, according to the map of said edition recorded in Volume 5, page 74 of the map records of Cameron County, Texas, and all of the Lot 5, Block 2, Nicholson Place, third filing at, in addition to the city of Harlingen, Cameron County, Texas, according to the map of said edition recorded in Volume 5, page 74 of the map records of Cameron County, Texas, and improvement on said lots, Discuss employment of assistant principal, Treasure Hills Elementary. Discussion employment of assistant principal, Harlingen High School South. Discuss employment of teachers and other professional staff. We're now in closed session. Wow, that was We will reconvene into open session for action on matter discussed in executive session. Consideration and take action on resolution for the purchase of real estate lot 6, Block 2, Nicholson Place, third filing, in addition to the city.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we approve, as recommended by staff in closed session, the property that is specifically detailed and identified as 6A on our agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Pyro, second by Mr. Hymas. Is there discussion?
Excellent motion.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consider employment of assistant principal, Treasure Hills Elementary.
Mr. President, I move that we approve employment of assistant principal as Treasure Hills Elementary.
Second
We have a
motion.
motion by Mr. Hymas, second by Ms. Flourier. Is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Consider employment of assistant principal at Harlingen High School South.
Mr. President, move approval of the employment of the assistant principal for Harlingen High School South as presented in executive session.
Second the motion.
Motion by Dr. Pettis, second by Dr. Muniz. Is there discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consider employment of teachers and other professional staff.
Mr. President, I move that we employ the assistant principal, employ the teachers and other professional staff as recommended.
Second the motion.
Motion by Mrs. Fleury, second by Dr. Muniz. Is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.